I call Dennis O'Rourke.
Mr Speaker, with this rather pathetic bill, National is doing just little things, just for show, things that don't go far enough to do any real good. In fact, this bill will go nowhere close to solving the housing crisis, and there is a housing crisis, despite what the Prime Minister tries to tell people. And there's a housing crisis simply because first home buyers have no hope in this country of being able to buy a new home unless they have a rich uncle or some other source of finance that most people actually can't access. And, Mr Speaker, National members opposite have tried to say that New Zealand First opposes RMA reform. Well, they can't have listened to speeches given by New Zealand First members. We have never opposed RMA reform. In fact, I myself have given speeches in this House saying that the RMA Act does need reform as far as especially processes go. We acknowledge that it takes far too long and costs far too much money, and that there are other barriers to sensible development in this country, and we do want to see sensible, practical housing for New Zealanders. We don't want to see the RMA amended as far as sections 5, 6 and 7 go. We have definitely got problems there, and we'll be talking about that when those RMA reforms come up for debate. But never let it be said that New Zealand First opposes sensible RMA reform for the purpose of assisting the provision of homes for New Zealanders. Now, Mr Speaker, this bill does recognise that first home buyers can't find the finance needed for a home these days. It's the one good thing it does do. It recognises a problem. What it doesn't do is actually do much about it. Simply giving people access to their own savings is a very low-level attempt to assist. They need much, much more help than that. This is a derisory method of assisting first homeowners to buy a new home. It's only allowing access to their own money, and that is hardly ever likely to make the difference between a young couple getting the money they need for a deposit for a new home or not. Hardly ever going to make the difference. For a few it might do, a very few. Worse still, even those who do make use of this facility will have to do so at the expense of their own retirement savings. And Mr Speaker, that is a very, very bad idea. And it actually shouldn't be necessary for people to have to dip into those savings if the government had the wit to put forward policies and facilities for people to be able to afford to buy a new home, and that fundamentally means raising a deposit and getting a reasonable bank loan. Now, Mr Speaker, if this government was serious about assisting first home buyers, it would provide a fund to do just that, or it would adopt New Zealand First policy to assist first home buyers to purchase a section for a new home on easy terms by paying back a loan for a section over 25 years at very concessionary interest rates, and other policies which we have to support those objectives as well. The government should just take a look at our policy, do that, and then they'd be doing something sensible, something this bill doesn't get close to, because this government is simply too mean, or is in fact too disinterested in the realities of the issue to do that. In fact, it's a bit like throwing a thimbleful of water at a bonfire. That's about the magnitude and worth of this particular bill. Now, looking at the bill, the levels set out for the purchase of new homes in Auckland are just too low. The assumption about purchasing homes around the $500,000 mark, when new homes are in at least the $600,000 mark and probably much closer to $800,000, is the reality of the situation. Now, Mr Speaker, the Minister obviously didn't know that, because I heard him speak and he talked about this bill providing sufficient assistance for people to being able to purchase a home of $550,000. Well, it won't. It won't get there. It won't be enough. In fact, this minister is nothing more than a master of spin. He builds facades, a bit like Juan Perón, you know, building facades for people to look at, but there's actually nothing behind them. This minister is a little bit like that. And builders and property developers are more interested in building premium homes these days, where they get a much better return, not building homes that ordinary people can afford. So what does the government really think it's doing to achieve anything with this bill? It will achieve something for a very few number of people, very few, when there are literally hundreds of thousands of young couples in this country looking for much more assistance than that. This government is simply not trying hard enough. Furthermore, the rate of increase in house price inflation is still much higher than the rise in people's household incomes. Homes are getting further and further away for those people every day, and the government's really not doing much about it, except to tell people they can use their retirement savings. Well, that really isn't enough. Not enough to make any real difference. It does not address the real issues of assisting first home buyers to obtain the finance they need. Another problem is that there's growing unease that actually the Auckland housing market is a bubble, and a dangerously growing bubble, fuelled to a significant degree by immigration numbers. 30,000 increase in Auckland alone in the last year. Don't tell me that doesn't make any difference. Everyone with half a brain knows that it does, and it makes a big difference. And beyond immigration, there is speculative foreign investment in the local market, which adds further fuel to the fire, and the government's not doing anything about that either. At some time, that bubble is likely to pop, with potentially huge damage to Kiwi families and massive social problems to follow. And where does it leave people whose retirement money could have been growing exponentially over that time, and instead diverted to housing? It leaves them in a position where their retirement savings are going to be degraded, and they should not have to do that. They should be able to save for their retirement and afford to buy a home in this country. We can do that. Other parties seem to know how to do that. National clearly doesn't have the wit to do anything about it. Mr. Speaker, this is short-term, band-aid thinking. It's a bill which is unobjectionable, and New Zealand First will vote for it, but we know, as the people out there know, that a lot more than this bill needs to be done about the housing crisis, a very real housing crisis in this country. In fact, this bill is probably actually fuelling fires, is probably actually counterproductive, and it will certainly damage retirement savings. It's really a bill that's hardly worth having at all. It's doing next to nothing. But it's some possible help for a very few. So New Zealand First will vote for it on that basis. But we expect a lot better, and so do the young people of this country.
I call Andrew Bailey.